Well, I'm available to start at right tackle.
You can't see when I have clothes on.
All right. Well, there's not an even playing field. There's never been an even playing field. There never will be an even playing field.
What shampoo do you use on your hair?
You don't need to be Superman to play in this offense.
You're listening to The Red Zone. Welcome, Badgers fans, to another episode of The Red Zone. Later in the podcast, we're going to talk to Badgers defensive tackle Bryson Williams, a Nebraska native who's playing against the Cornhuskers this week. But first, we've got Jesse Temple from The Athletic. How you doing, Jesse?
Doing well. How are you, Jason? Thanks for having me on again.
Good, and I remembered to say you were from The Athletic from the top this time.
Thanks for the plug off the top. It's much appreciated.
How can people subscribe?
Go to preseason.com. There's always different deals running. You can get 20, 30, 40% off. And if you're listening and you haven't subscribed, I am biased, but I certainly advise it because not only can you get all the Badgers coverage that I have, but everything from writers across the country and national sports and city and statewide sports. So it's a pretty good deal for all roughly the cost of a cup of coffee, and that's what you pay for a month's worth of stories.
No, I think most of us, needed to kind of alter our expectations for this team after the BYU loss. No, I don't think anyone really saw that coming. But the performance against Iowa a couple weeks ago before the bye week, did that change your perception at all of this team, positively or negatively, about what they can accomplish this year?
Yes. I mean, the middle of the fourth quarter, they're looking at a second straight loss, being 2-2, and basically everything we talked about in the preseason being worthless because the national championship playoff dreams would have been gone. I don't think they would have wound up winning the West with that loss, and I certainly understand that there are 8 more games, but you're looking at a 2-game swing because Iowa would have held a tiebreaker, and the Hawkeyes are going to be favored in every game except a road game against Penn State, and Wisconsin obviously has to go to Penn State and Michigan. So, yeah, I thought that was huge, and Paul Chryst always talks about taking one game at a time, and then the story of the season writes itself through all those games. But to me, that could ultimately be one of the biggest ones of the season because of what it means for the Badgers, and it showed that they can go into a hostile environment and win after what happened against BYU, which really nobody saw coming.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird game for me because it was a massive win for Wisconsin, obviously, and they did need to win that game to probably win the Big Ten West, and it was sort of a season-saving victory, so to speak. You could probably argue, but then again, I wasn't really super encouraged by the actual performance, especially defensively. They gave up 7.48 yards per play, which was the most they've given up since Alabama in 2015. Just gave up a lot of big plays as they did against BYU as well, and I think you had to give them credit for, making stops in the fourth quarter to be able to allow their offense to win that game on the last couple of drives. But I don't know, it just this defense just doesn't look like it's where it needs to be right now, and I think and the offense hasn't been quite as explosive or potent as we expected either. So it's one of those where I feel like after that Iowa game, it kind of led me to believe the BYU game wasn't a fluke. Which after that BYU game, they haven't really played anybody any good opponents outside of that BYU game, and you think, well, maybe they just had an off game, maybe they were overlooking this opponent, and they're going to come out and play like we expected them to against Iowa and their next few Big Ten games. But I think that even though they won that game, it definitely has me a little concerned for their season outlook here. I think it's going to be really difficult to, I think they're going to win the West, but I think we can kiss the playoffs goodbye probably. I don't know. I mean,
talk about a negative Nancy here in first week of October. I'm just kidding. I probably agree with you, but that's why they play the games, and they were going to have to probably win all these games except one before anyway if they were going to have a chance. So they're going to have their opportunity to prove it. That's about all you can say at this point. That's
the thing. I mean, they will have their opportunities because until they lose their second game, they're not out of it. So maybe I shouldn't say that yet. But if they win the Michigan game, if they win the next 2 weeks, that probably thrusts them right back into the national conversation. So we'll have to wait and see. But at this point, I just can't see it happening. But I talked about the defense some, but how worried are you about the big plays they've allowed?
Moderately worried. I think we knew this was certainly possible because of how young these guys were. We knew on the back end there'd be 3 new starters, and Jim Leonhard continues to rotate cornerbacks and try and find new guys, and now Deron Harrell is the latest to get the start against Iowa. I know there was a big one on Faion Hicks, and he was flagged for a pass interference, and Hawkinson, the tight end from Iowa, caught it anyway. I think it was a 46-yard gain or something like that, and then right away they hit a touchdown pass there. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some concern here because Nebraska's offense is just as potent as any team they faced so far, certainly with a dual-threat quarterback in Adrian Martinez, a couple of really talented wide receivers that can stretch you out. So the big play thing is a concern, and another concern that I have, which maybe ties into another question you have about some of the issues defensively.
Just move on to the next one. Your biggest concern defensively was the next thing I was going to ask you.
Like, one area of concern for me is what appears to be an inability to get enough pressure on the quarterback and sack the quarterback and affect the game. And I totally understand that the first two opponents like to get the ball out quick, and that makes it a little more difficult to sack the quarterback. But a couple of years ago, this defense had 42 sacks in 14 games, 3 sacks per game. This year they have 3 sacks total in 4 games, and there are obviously a number of circumstances that dictate that, but some of that is youth and inexperience, and the injuries, like Andrew Van Ginkel not being healthy, I think is huge there. And one of the things that TJ Edwards said earlier this week was we need to do a better job on first and second down to make sure that it's a medium or long distance on third down, because if it's 3rd and 3, you don't know if they're going to run or pass, but they can run, and obviously you're not sacking anybody if they're in 3rd and short continuously. So I think that's one area that they need to get better at, and Jim Leonard talked about that as well. It's not like something they don't know, but when you're able to do that, you're completely altering the course of a series, because now it's 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 9 or something like that. So that's one area that I would look for moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with you on the pass rush. I think I mentioned this in my film room story last week, but I think Iowa only had 2 third downs that were longer than 5 yards, and that goes back to what you're saying about, you want to get these guys in 3rd and long situations. That's when you can really, tee off and get after the passer. And this defense has done a great job of that the last few years, and it's just not happened so far this year. Part of that has to do with the young defensive line too. I think all of this kind of works together. The young defensive line is maybe not as good as they've been the last few years with all those seniors that left, and a team like Iowa can kind of pound the ball and get you in a lot of get themselves in a lot of third and manageable situations, and that leads to some difficult, a difficult job to get to the passer on 3rd down when you're facing these 3rd and 3s and 3rd and 4s. And I think that Wisconsin fans have probably been spoiled by the talent they've had at outside linebacker the last few years. Going from Vince Beagle and Joe Schobert to Vince Beagle and T.J. Watt to Garrett Dooley and Leon Jacobs. I think it's just those are NFL guys right there. And while I think Andrew Van Ginkel he's their best pass rusher right now, and having him out the last couple of games has been really tough. But they need some other guys to step up. Whether it's Zach Bond or Tyler Johnson when he's in there, or some of the defensive linemen, maybe Isaiah Laudermilk to get a little bit more pressure. And I think that's and that obviously helps the secondary out too when you can get pressure on the quarterback. So I think it all kind of works together, and I think at some point they're going to have to figure this out. Now offensively, it was really sort of a hot and cold game. They went long stretches where they didn't do much, but they had a 95-yard drive early, and then they had the 88-yard drive to win the game in the final minute there. Alex Hornibrook was, he was 9 of 10 in the second half, I believe, and the one incompletion was a drop, and 5 for 5 on the last drive. And I thought he really stepped up and bounced back after a so-so BYU game. But do you think he's kind of quietly having a really good season here? Because he's been more efficient than he's been the last couple of years, and only 2 interceptions through 4 games, although, the BYU interception was a big game changer. But what have you kind of made out of his season? Because I think a lot of fans still haven't liked what they've seen out of him, but efficiency-wise, it's been a little better.
I wonder if a lot of fans are ever going to like what they see out of him, and maybe that's the nature of being a quarterback. I do think he's quietly had a good season, and Pro Football Focus always has these stats that I find very illuminating and fascinating, and they put together before last week, after the Iowa game, but before teams played over Wisconsin's bye. And Alex was like 3rd in the FBS in quarterback rating, like overall rating, which obviously takes into a lot of factors. But I just thought it was indicative of what he's been able to do. And you can't take away that performance against Iowa was as good as it gets. We've seen him at the top of his game against BYU and Miami in the Orange Bowl. BYU last year, not this year. I think that's what frustrates fans the most, is they see what his ceiling could be, and it's like they expect that all the time. And I understand they expect not to see a bad interception against BYU that, as you said, was game-changing. But yeah, the 3-touchdown, no interception performance against Iowa, as we said, that could be a game that changes the course of this season. And one of his 2 interceptions, it really wasn't his fault. He kind of got hit from behind, and the ball popped loose. The BYU pick certainly was. But I think he's been what you would hope for out of a junior quarterback. He's much improved. And you talk about the efficiency. I was looking at his numbers. He's averaging, I think, 22.5 passes per game this season, and last year it was 22.7. So basically he's throwing the same amount, but he's averaging 200 yards a game right now. And it is a little bit of a small sample size because we're only through 4 games. But yeah, I think for the most part, he's held up his end of the bargain, and he's where you would hope he should be as a junior.
That is interesting because it kind of feels like he's passed the ball less, especially when you had the one game against New Mexico where he only threw it 11 times. So I hadn't looked at those numbers. That's really interesting.
I know he's passed 90 times in 4 games, so if my math is correct, yeah, I believe that's what it is.
Do you think that maybe they're missing Quintez Cephas more than maybe we thought? Because all the depth at receiver, we kind of assumed, they can make up for that, but he was their best guy last year.
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I don't know how you can say that the group would be as good or better when you lose your number 1 playmaker, and he was very clearly the number 1 guy last year in the first 9 games until he got hurt against Indiana, and he could do it all. I mean, he was an all Big Ten performer at that level, an NFL draft pick type of guy, and A.J. Taylor was phenomenal those first couple games. He was leading the Big Ten in receiving yards per game through those first 2 games. And Kendrick Pryor certainly has his moments. We've been talking about him since the start of fall camp. And having Danny Davis back is obviously huge because he provides another big play threat. But I do think not having Quintez certainly impacts this offense and the ability to have those game-changing big-time plays.
Do you think maybe we just got kind of carried away by our expectations for this offense? Because as much talent as they have, it's still, I think people get really excited when they see whether it's an offense or a defense that's returning almost everybody from the year before, but then you kind of assume that they're going to make some huge jump with the same players. And sure, they should make a jump if you return that many guys, but do you think maybe we kind of just, assumed a lot of these players would take a big step up when really, maybe we shouldn't have expected quite as much?
That's a hard question for me to answer because I really, this is me speaking for myself, not, I guess, media at large. I don't really think I felt like I was carried away necessarily. Like, I thought it was reasonable to expect them to take some sort of step forward, and there are a lot of factors that affect points per game, for example. I think they were 33.8 last year, and my thought was this team has a chance to be maybe the 3rd best offense in school history from a statistical standpoint. The Russell Wilson 2011 team was the record setter. The Scott Tolzien 2010 team was number 2. Those are the only 2 teams to average over 40. And really, those are the only 2 teams to average more than 35 points per game in a season. So for me, I thought, well, this is a group that should average more than 35, less than 40. I know I've said that on previous podcasts. And so to me, that would place them firmly as like the 3rd best offense, and we didn't really see it. They had 34 against Western Kentucky. Obviously that game against BYU significantly impacts the points per game average, and I know that's not the sole indicator of how an offense has performed, but I feel like it was reasonable to expect them to take some jump forward and become one of those better offenses. And I'm not going to rule it out after 4 games and say they can't, because this offensive line is still very good and can wear people down. And Jonathan Taylor, maybe it's kind of been forgotten a little bit because there are so many other topics, but he's been as good as advertised, and really, in a lot of ways, better than what he was last year.
Leads the country in yards per game.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good.
Let's play a little fact or fiction. This is something I haven't really done on the podcast ever, but just decided to throw some in there in the middle of our podcast today. So fact or fiction, Wisconsin will win the Big Ten West.
I'm going fact. I think, there are 8 games left, but the Iowa game to me was a big decider in this because, as we've talked about, some other team in the West is going to have to prove to me that they're capable of actually winning the division. I really don't feel like any other team has inspired a significant amount of confidence there. So what I do think is it's possible the Badgers lose 2 games, maybe to Michigan and Penn State, and still win the West because, let's say, Iowa loses to Penn State or something like that. I think they can go 7-2 and win the West, but right now I'll say fact.
I'm going fact as well, but I kind of brought this up because I just don't think it's quite as a sure thing as people are kind of assuming. I think, you beat Iowa, you beat your toughest competition, you have the tiebreaker over them. It's like, okay, they're good. But I don't really see them beating Michigan or Penn State on the road right now, and I look at Iowa's schedule, and I think they've got a really good chance to win outside of that Penn State game. And if they are able to do that, then that means Wisconsin will win on a tiebreaker. So I just don't know if there's as much margin for error here. I mean, you have one bad game against, at Northwestern could be a tricky game. Michigan almost lost there this past weekend, and Purdue's an improved team. Now they started the season off poorly, but if they start to turn it around by the end of the year, they don't play them until the second to last week of the year. Maybe that's not as easy of a game as you normally have against that team. So I don't know. I'm definitely going fact. I think they're the favorite right now. They're in the driver's seat after the Iowa win, but I don't think the margin for error is really there, and I think I don't think they can lose more than 2 games. And I think the way they've been playing, especially defensively, there's certainly a possibility for a couple games you wouldn't expect, maybe Northwestern, someone like that, to kind of surprise them. So I'm going fact, but it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be quite as easy as people think. Okay, fact or fiction? The Badgers must win the Big Ten for Jonathan Taylor to win the Heisman Trophy.
I'm going to go fiction on this. I don't think he's going to win the Heisman, even though he's on pace for a ridiculous season that puts him, I think, just under 2,200 yards. But, and maybe this is a quarterback thing, but Lamar Jackson at Louisville, Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M won the Heisman, and their teams were nowhere near the championship caliber race. Like, they weren't in the position to compete for a national championship. But here's another thing I'll say. I don't like, so the college football writers at The Athletic, every Sunday we vote in a Heisman style, our top 3, just the way you vote when you vote on the Heisman. And like the top 3 and really the top 4, they're all quarterbacks. And maybe it's easier because the numbers that those guys put up are ridiculous. I think the Alabama quarterback is in the driver's seat right now to win the Heisman, but you've got like Kyler Murray at Oklahoma, I think Will Grier at West Virginia, and there's another quarterback that I'm blanking on who's been killing it. Ohio State's Dwayne Haskins. Yeah, like to me, those guys are in the top 4. I think if Taylor's at his current pace, he's a Heisman finalist, but it's going to be awfully hard to dethrone one of those quarterbacks whose team is certainly going to be in the playoff, and the numbers are going to be crazy.
Well, what would have to happen for Taylor to win it, do you think?
Maybe a few hundred more yards, certainly more touchdowns, and it doesn't hurt when your team is in playoff contention. I mean, obviously that's not like a prerequisite, but I think for a running back at Wisconsin, maybe that's the thing that's going to kind of keep you on that level. I mean, right now, as you said, like he's number 1 in the country in rushing yards per game. I'm not disputing that he should be a Heisman finalist, but to win it over some of those other quarterbacks. Melvin Gordon finished second in the Heisman Trophy voting in 2014 to Marcus Mariota at Oregon, and Gordon put together one of the greatest seasons you'll ever see in the history of college football. So I'm kind of like, if that guy can't win, I feel like it's going to be hard for Jonathan Taylor to win.
Well, the reason I asked you the second part was because it seems like maybe you would say fact if you think he has such a low chance of winning that they have to like win the Big Ten, make the playoffs or something for him to win it. Yeah,
I guess I'm more like, I just don't know how much it's going to matter. Yeah. I guess I could go either way on that.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to go fiction on this too. I think that he's on pace for just about 2,200 yards right now. If he gets to, 2,500 like Gordon did, which isn't really like, I guess, that much of a stretch if he has a couple huge games here in conference play, and say he has, just a monster game in the Big Ten title game, but they still lose, I think at least gives him a chance. It's going to be hard to beat Tua with the numbers he's putting up and some of the other quarterbacks, like you said, but I don't think it necessarily has to result in a Big Ten title for him to have a real chance. Now, I don't really see him winning it either, but right now, I think like you said, people haven't really been talking about him as much. He's on pace for 2,200 yards and 18 touchdowns, so if he keeps up that pace and maybe increases a little bit, I think that maybe he gets himself back in the conversation. And I think it's about having sort of moments throughout the year. Like if he has let's say they win the Michigan or the Penn State game. Let's say they just win one of those, and he has like a monster game. Like that can put him right back in the discussion. So I'm going to go fiction.
You have a Heisman vote?
I do.
Me too. So we can impact the voting in some very small measure.
So we can't... I'm not going to be betting on it, that's for sure.
No.
But it's is this your first year with the Heisman vote? You had a couple years?
No, I've been doing it for several years now. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
I know it's going to be a tough one. Okay, fact or fiction. This is my toughest one for me. Dante Kerry Williams would be a starter right now if he hadn't left the program.
I'm going to go fiction on this because I think if he wasn't going to be a starter to open the season, I feel like Jim Leonhard made it pretty clear that he wasn't displaying what you needed to display in practice. And I know that Leonhard continues to rotate through cornerbacks, but I just feel like he was in a little bit of a hole, and I don't know if he would have climbed out of it within a month. I mean, he certainly would have contributed. There's no question about that. The guy was the third corner last year, and we thought he was going to be a starter. But since this is pure speculation, I'm going to say fiction at this point.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to go fiction too here. I think it's all attitude based. You know, I think that if he, like Jim Leonhard said, like, you know, if he was not giving consistent effort in practice, and that was a big reason why he kind of fell off. I think and the reason I kind of put this one in here is because Deron Harrell has kind of pushed Caesar Williams for that starting spot, and it's sort of made me wonder, you know, well, if Deron Harrell is making this push, maybe at this point Kerry Williams would have taken over the spot. And you know, I think he would definitely have the talent to do so, but I think it would require him to, after that first depth chart came out, maybe saying, okay, it's time for me to get serious, really put my head down and work to get the spot back. And I think if he put in the consistent effort that Leonhard was looking for, I think he would be a starter by now. But like you said, it is kind of speculation, not knowing his mindset and how he would have responded. Obviously, we kind of saw how he responded, but I'm just going to go ahead and say fiction. But I do think that they could definitely use him right now. I know a lot of people after I think I tweeted when Kerry Williams left the program that he it was a big loss for Wisconsin, and a lot of fans were saying, no, this isn't a big loss. Like we have all these young corners, and he can, if he's just going to quit, you know, good riddance. But clearly, I think what we've seen is they could use him this season. Do you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that.
Last one here, fact or fiction. Wisconsin has nothing to worry about this weekend when Nebraska visits Camp Randall.
I'm going to say they have something to worry about. Nebraska has been terrible. They're 0-4 for the first time in 73 years, and there's just panic across Lincoln because that's the only sport that matters around there. But they at least have some big play capability on offense, and we just talked about, well, is Wisconsin's defense susceptible to giving up big plays? You know, Adrian Martinez, the freshman quarterback, is a dual threat, and he can hurt you both ways, and these guys are well aware of it. I'm not sitting here saying Nebraska's going to win. Wisconsin's a 3-touchdown favorite, and this is a game the Badgers should win, but I think there's something to worry about. If nothing else, you can just look to the BYU game when Wisconsin was, I think, also a 3-touchdown favorite. Well, that didn't work out too well, so I think these guys learned a valuable lesson there, that you don't just show up on game day and expect to beat people. You have to put in the work. So, something to worry about, slightly.
Yeah, actually, I think the line dropped from 23-19, which kind of surprised me.
Is that because you've been placing all the money on Nebraska?
Yeah, that's all me. I'm definitely a sharp. But no, I'm actually gonna go fiction here. I just think this Nebraska team is just I think they're just terrible, and I think it's gonna take a long time to turn this around. And I just think they're in a position where I just can't see them coming into Camp Randall and giving them a game. Now, I think this is a little different. Like you said, this is different, kind of a different situation than the BYU game. First of all, I think BYU is a better team than Nebraska by a pretty significant margin. Secondly, I think that, like you said, I think they kind of learned that lesson already. You know, I think you look at this game, you could say, well, maybe this is a trap game because they have Michigan next week, as they had Iowa after the BYU game. But I just think at this point that they know there's no margin for error at this point. You know, they were undefeated. They were 2-0 going into that BYU game, and I think you just don't expect a team that you beat, 40-6 last season on the road. You don't expect them to come in and give you that kind of game. But I think at this point that they know that if they want to get back into the national conversation for the playoffs, they can't take a game off. And for the Big Ten West too, like I mentioned earlier, you can't. If you have one weird loss, Iowa could take advantage and pass you up, even though you already beat them. So I think they understand the margin for error is not there, and they're not going to be really overlooking Nebraska. So I would say fiction. They don't have anything to worry about at this point. Last one here before we review our podcast from the past. I think did you pick, what was your season prediction? Was it 10-2?
For record, I said 10-2. I said something was holding me back from picking 11-1. I feel much better.
I think
about
we
that.
know what was holding you back now. But if you had to redo it now, would you? What would it be? Would you change it?
I'm gonna stick with it.
Really?
Because that's what I said then, and I'm stubborn. But if I were to change it, the only other change in my mind would be 9-3. I mean, I don't know if this group can run the table here and go 11-1, but for now, I'm gonna stick with 10-2 and think that somehow they can pull out a game either against Michigan or Penn State. But 9-3 seems a lot more probable at this point after a loss to BYU.
Yeah, I did go 11-1. I was going back and forth between that and 10-2, and I went with the 11-1. And I'm definitely changing at this point. I don't think they're going to win out and go to the Big Ten title game at 11-1. So I think probably 9-3. I would actually probably shade a little more toward 8-4 than before I went to 10-2. But I think 9-3 is probably what's going to happen. I think you look at the rest of their schedule, and it's hard for me to see them going to Michigan or Penn State and winning, but I also think that they're a good enough team to take care of their West opponents and be able to finish 9-3. So it's going to be interesting to see, though. Like I said earlier, I think if they can win that, if they do actually go in and win that Michigan game, it suddenly changes sort of their prospects for the season. Okay, we're going to do a quick review of our over-unders that we did in the preseason. Now, we're only 4 games in, so a lot of time to go here, but since you were on the podcast, I decided let's go ahead and take a look at them. I'm going to just run through these really quickly, and just if you want to add anything to it or stop me to talk about it, just let me know. So our first one was rushing yards for the Badgers' second leading rusher. It was set at 500. I went under, you went over. This is one of the 3 we disagreed on. And right now, Taiwan Deal is on pace for, I did a 14-game pace.
Sure.
Because I feel like they're on pace to make the Big Ten title game, I guess. Taiwan Deal is on pace for 585 yards. So it looks like you're in the slight lead there.
I feel good about that one because I picked Taiwan Deal specifically thinking that he would be the guy. I feel like he should get a few more carries. It would give him a better chance at it. His yards per carry average is like 5.8, 5.7, which I've been really impressed with him and Groshek as reserves to Taylor. But that's all I'll say on that one.
And then Zach Bond and Andrew Van Ginkel combined sacks. We both went under 13.5.
Feel good about that one.
They are on pace for 3.5 for the whole season combined. So we talked about the pass rush earlier. Aaron Cruikshank catches. We both went under 9.5, and he's on pace for 0. Has not caught a pass yet. He's run a couple jet sweeps, but looks like he's not playing a huge role yet. This one, this kind of surprised me when I looked up this. But TJ Edwards, over under 95 tackles. I went over, you went under, and he's on pace for only 66.5 right now. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, slightly. I mean, I didn't think he'd get to 95. He hadn't had that yet in his career. But he's still going to be there as a big-time playmaker in the end.
Yeah. Alex Hornibrook passing yards, over under 3,000. He's on pace for exactly 2,800 right now. We both went under, so we're on the right side of that currently. This one's pretty interesting. Interceptions by defensive backs I set the number at 10.5, and they are currently on pace for 10.5. We both went under on that one.
Well, the good news is they won't finish with 10.5 because you either have one or you have none.
Yeah, that one will not be a push, although it is on pace for a push right now. Receptions by Wisconsin's top pass-catching tight end. I set the over-under at 19.5, and the reason I set that number, if you remember, is I think for the last, I can't remember how many years, but a ton of years in a row, they've had a tight end get at least 20 catches, and I wasn't sure if someone would step up and fill that role that Fumagalli left, but Jake Ferguson is it. We both went over, and Jake Ferguson has 12 already, and he's on pace for 42, so as long as he stays healthy, I think we got a pretty good shot at getting that one. Freshman on the defensive line who will play meaningful snaps was 4.5. We both went under, and 4 have done so far. Like we were talking about earlier, Isaiah Mullins is the one question mark, and it looks like he's not really near the rotation right now, so we're probably on the good side of that one. And then offensive linemen who will earn at least one first-team All-American honor, 2.5. We both went over.
We got a little excited on this one. The more I evaluated, it seems unlikely that 3 guys are going to be a first-team pick.
Yeah.
The line's been good, but not great this far, to the level that we thought they would be at this point. Not to say that, again, Jonathan Taylor's leading the country in rushing yards per game. A lot of that is on Jonathan, but some guys are creating holes for him up front. But we probably should have gone under in hindsight.
I do think it's still possible that 3 guys make it. We talked about Taylor. Like, if Taylor ends up with, comfortably over 2,000 yards and he's a Heisman finalist, then people are going to look at that Wisconsin line and be like, and look at the fact that these guys were All-Americans last year.
It's so hard to evaluate offensive
I know.
It's like, well, what did the numbers say on the guy running the ball? Can you really evaluate?
Yeah, the only way to truly evaluate them is to watch a bunch of film on them, but I'm sure these voters probably don't have a ton of time on their hands to just look at all the offensive linemen that are candidates for All-Americans and watch a bunch of film on them. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I think the offensive line definitely played better against Iowa, so we'll kind of see if out of the bye week they play better. And then we already kind of went over this one. I think you're definitely going to win this one. Regular season wins over under 10.5. I went over, you went under, and they're on pace for 9 right now. So,
did we bet a steak dinner on this? I feel good about.
I don't think we did. Yeah,
I
you have
sworn.
You have a real chance at 10-0 here. I think the only one you're off the pace on. So the offensive lineman is a question mark.
Yeah,
you need 3 guys, and then the interception of the DBs is right on the mark right now. But other than that, I think you're on pace to get every single one. So congratulations on your early season over-unders here.
This may be the highlight of my career, so I'm going to bask in this glory for weeks and weeks.
Yeah, I don't remember if we bought a steak dinner. I'll have to go back and look at the podcast, but
I'm pretty sure we didn't.
Okay, well, I thought you were going to try to convince me that
maybe I will.
Okay, well, thanks for joining me, Jesse. You can follow him on Twitter at Jesse Temple. Is that right?
That is correct.
And follow me at Jason_Galloway.
And subscribe to The Athletic. You will not regret it.
All right, thanks for joining me, Jesse.
Thanks, Jason.
So obviously, I'm sure a lot of people this is kind of a big week for you, playing Nebraska, from Lincoln and everything. Is this, I know you knew it was coming, but is this, does it feel like a bigger week to you playing Nebraska?
Really, not really. At the beginning of the season, I thought that when this game came up, I'd feel, more amped up and more than regular, but I'm really just focused, as I would be every week. Because I know once I get out there, it's going to all go away, and that's just me and the guy across from me. So, it's not really as hyped up to me as I thought it would be. So.
Have you got a lot of, or any family or friends making the trip to Madison?
Yeah, I got some family and I got some family coming up, and I know a lot of my friends have been texting me saying that they're going to try to make the game. So I hope they can. Nebraska fans travel. They travel. So, I know there's probably some people I don't even know who are coming.
How have you been kind of jockeying teammates for extra tickets and things like that?
No, not really, because as long as I got my family, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I have been doing a little bit. I haven't any other game, but this game I asked for two extra ones so I can have a couple more friends come up. Yeah. It's cool that you can do that. So. What
are kind of your thoughts on their start? Because no one really, I don't think people really expected Scott Frost to go undefeated in his first year, but I think it's obviously it's a surprising start for them to start 0-4. What's the kind of are you kind of surprised by what you've seen from them so far?
I haven't been paying the most attention, but I just know that when he was going in there, he's gonna try to do something new, and when you do something new, when you try to do something so new, sometimes it can happen. I know that the fans in Nebraska aren't even that mad or because they're still behind them. I wouldn't say the 0-4 start kind of defines who they are. They're still Nebraska. Nebraska will come out and beat anybody. So, I wouldn't let that, that stat define who they are.
How close were you to going to Nebraska there at the end?
It was Nebraska. Well, Nebraska at the time was the only team that could I would open my ear to when I was committed to Wisconsin. No other team. I got contacted by many other teams. I wouldn't give them anything. Nebraska, I kind of took some thought, took a couple days, thought over a whole bunch with my family, myself, really myself, and talked with my family. It wasn't the hardest decision, but it was a tough decision for me.
Yeah. What was Scott Frost's recruiting pitch when he first got hired and he tried to flip you?
Really the main message was, he played at Nebraska, left and came back, and that he knows what it takes for Nebraska to be back where they were, and that's homegrown talent. And he knows that I'm from there, and that he wanted me to be the centerpiece of it, of the whole, Nebraska, the whole Nebraska, get back to where it was. That's really what it was. He just wanted for me to go there because I'm from Nebraska. I went to the games. Even though the previous coaching staff didn't show me any type of love, he said that because I was the first one. When he went there to start coaching Nebraska, I was the first one that he visited and all that. Yeah. So he really just wanted me to be the starting centerpiece of it, really.
Did the previous staff recruit you at all?
No.
Not at all?
None.
Did that really surprise you?
Yeah. I mean, to me, I thought I was the best defensive tackle in the state. They thought somebody else. I can't blame them for what they were thinking or whatever was going on. But I was surprised. Not mad, just surprised.
Yeah. I mean, I guess growing up, did you kind of always envision yourself playing for Nebraska? I'm sure it was sort of a little bit of a, mess with your mind a little bit where they're not interested in you at all. And then they have the coaching staff change and suddenly you're committed to Wisconsin.
I mean, since I grew up in Rockford, I wasn't the hugest I was still a Nebraska fan. I wasn't the hugest Nebraska fan, but my mom, my family, all from Nebraska. So, yeah, it was surprising when I didn't get any type of interest or anything from Coach Riley and them. But, yeah, as soon as Coach Frost got hired, I got a call the same night. So.
How many people on social media and your friends at school were telling you, make the jump to Nebraska?
At the time?
Once Scott Frost took over,
when Scott Frost took over, I had everybody. Teachers, friends' parents, friends, every there's not one person in the whole state that wanted me to come here. Yeah. But like I said, it was between me, and I would talk with my family. Even not my close family, even my far family wanted me to stay there, obviously. But yeah, it really just came down to what I was feeling, how I was feeling, my thoughts of what was going on, and I thought this was the best place for me. And that's really what it came down to. I thought that nobody could teach me better than Olive and Coach Noakes. And I still believe that today. I don't think there's anybody that can teach me better than Olive and Coach Noakes.
Do you have a motivation to sort of prove that previous coaching staff wrong?
If they were still there, yeah. If they were still there. But for this one, Coach Frost is a great guy. Coach Frost was my second FBS offer at UCF. I've been cool with Coach Frost for years now. Coach Rude there, he coached me my sophomore year in high school. I have no bad feelings at all towards this Nebraska team. And I think they're a team that maybe, this might not be the year, but I do think that they can turn it around at some point. Coach Frost with his attitude, his coaching perseverance, he's going to flip it sometime. One way or another. That's just what it is.
All right, thanks, Bryson.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
That's going to do it for this week. A big thanks to Jesse and Bryson for coming on. As we do every week during the season, we're going to have another episode of the Red Zone on Friday, our mailbag episode. If you want to get a question in for that, for me to answer, just tweet me at Jason_Galloway. And we'll also do a live chat late Saturday night after the Nebraska game if you want to join me there on Twitter. Keep visiting madison.com for all your Badgers football coverage, and thanks for listening.